I called my mom. I was in the middle of the woods in Jacksonville, Florida. My parents live in Mobile. And I said, I need help. And she said, I have been praying for rain. There's been no rain in the forecast. And that was the reason why I called her, because my clothes were drenched. I stunk. I had a rat's nest in my hair, had no food, nothing for 2 weeks, mind you. And they found me.
Let's be honest about recovery.
The rewards, the challenges.
Let's talk about our failures.
We are flawed people, after all.
Let's challenge the stigmas that weigh us down.
Because while most of us are looked at,
Few of us are seen.
Let's talk about addiction.
And how Christ overcomes our weaknesses.
Because we are loved.
because we are loved.
Because we are loved.
We are loved.
We are
Because
loved.
we are loved.
Hi, my name is Bo Ridley.
And I'm Tasha Ridley.
For years of my life, I thought was going to be drugs, rehab, jail, in that order. That's the way that I saw myself. But thank God I came out of that.
I struggled with addiction for 13 years, and due to sexual trauma, it led me down a path of lies, manipulation, and addiction. But praise God, I'm 14 years out of that cycle.
Hey everybody, Paul with Jesus Loves Addicts. We hope you were with us last week where we looked at Bo and Tasha Ridley's story in part 1, and today they'll finish that out for us. So if you haven't caught part 1, hop back and check it out, and welcome to part 2. So if I had to guess, and it's just a guess, Tasha, my guess is your story is a little different because
Yes.
you found relief in it as well. It wasn't just recreational. You found a respite.
Yes.
So here we're in the 20s.
Early 20s when it was just, I was a functioning addict for almost 10 years. So majority of my 20s. I held a great job. I was always great at what I did. I excelled at work. Again, that perfectionism, the performance,
That's
and all of that.
almost unfortunate, isn't it?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So I would go all out on the weekends and sober up on Sunday and go to work on Monday. And then I would drink during the week and then party hard on the weekends, all weekend, until one of my friends that we were using together with, I was really addicted to ecstasy at the time because that's what made me feel the most loving and the most out of my mind.
Out of your mind.
Out of my mind, not overanalyzing, being the perfectionism, having all the things in order. The time where I knew it was starting to be a problem was she said, Tasha, I can't keep up with you anymore. We've got to slow down. And I'm like, what? We're having fun, you know? And that was, I think, the first eye opener, like maybe I do need to slow down. Did it slow me down? Absolutely not. I would just find other people to hang out with and use with.
But you didn't use like other people and you were finally seeing it.
Absolutely. That's when I knew that maybe I might be a little excessive on this.
Well, in retrospect, did you know at that moment? Did you think that in that moment?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I just thought she was a lightweight.
Yeah, that's right. I need to find
something wrong with her, not me.
I need to find people I'm more compatible with. Yeah,
absolutely. I ended a 5-year relationship with the guy that I moved into. I bought a house at the age of 21, and the best advice my father gave me was to get it in my name because we weren't married. And I did. And so after that relationship kind of crumbled and fizzled out, he moved out. I started getting roommates temporarily to help pay for the bills and stuff. Like I said, I had a great job. I was in property management, all the bells and whistles, 21, owning my own vehicle, house, and all of that. But I would jump into relationship after relationship. There was never a time period that I was sober either. Again, the addiction and drugs.
I'm guessing not many of your relationships were sober either.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So you're fishing from the same pool you're swimming in. And
even if I didn't start dating somebody that was in the realm of my friends' circle of friends, I knew how to pick them, man. I would pick another addict, and it's like, okay, they might not do ecstasy, but now they're doing cocaine. So now I'm starting a new drug on top of the other drugs. And then the next man, he was a cocaine addict. So now I'm doing this. And then the pills came in, and that's when I found pain management about 25. Like I said earlier, my health issues, you know, in my mid-20s, I was diagnosed with osteopenia, along with scoliosis and a numerous long list of other things. Doctors said I wouldn't never conceive. They said I wouldn't, I would be in a walker by the age of 40. My bones will just brittle away, basically. And I believe those labels, you know, so I need to take this pill for that and this pill for that. And I was probably on 10 different medications at that time. And then I started with antidepressants and Xanax as well. So
plus all
we're having all
drugs.
the recreational, all the pain management drugs, all the psych meds, and all the other health issue meds. It was pretty in depth on all the things that I was taking, because I would believe anything you would tell me.
Well, that's what I was going to say, that if you're telling me in my mid-20s that at 40, my life's basically going to be over. I'm going to be in a walker.
Right.
You've given me an expiration date.
Absolutely.
So what do I care if I do all of this? What do I care if she or he can't keep up with me? I only have a certain amount of time.
Right. And I partied it like it was my last day every day. I would say the addiction went from functioning addict to full-blown addict and out of control. I was about 28, 29 years old. My job started noticing me calling out more. I would go to work high without sleeping for 2 to 3 days. You know, it just became a really noticeable point with friends. And then now my family is starting to notice. They knew I was on pain meds. They knew my health issues. They didn't know the addiction part of it or the street drugs. I was really good at manipulating and hiding things.
You've been doing it your whole life.
I've been doing it my whole life. Again, with that kind of two different lives. I was one way in front of people that were sober, and then there was a different me when I felt free and was able to let go. But by the age of 29, I was not dating. I was living with my boss at the time. We were both in property management, and she found me passed out in my room, and she didn't know what was going on. But I had went through a long weekend of cocaine, and coming down off of that, I didn't have any downers to take because I would mix all these drugs as well. So I was in my office and saw a duster inhaler, the computer cleaner, and it said, "Do not inhale." And I'm like, oh, wonder what would happen if I did. You know? Let's try. Yes, let's try.
Clarity of thought.
So I did that, and it was another thing that kind of like the ecstasy, where immediately I was like, this is good. I want more. And so my addiction went from pain pills and street drugs to dusters. Like, who would have ever thought? But yeah, I mean, I'm asthmatic. You know, it freezes your brain, your lungs, and all these things, and kills all your brain cells. And I'm sitting here huffing and huffing and huffing, where it was so bad to the point I was doing it at work, passing out at work. They didn't know what was going on with me. I would go to the store, buy cases at a time, and it overtook me so fast. I would say within 4 to 6 months, everybody knew. My roommate called my family in at that time. The police have pulled me over several times because they thought I was having a seizure at the wheel.
Were you ever? Did you have seizures?
I would pass out at the wheel and not know where I was or how I got there, or end up in a different area from where I even started at. But I didn't care. At that point in my life, I was done. I didn't have the courage to take my own life, but I wanted my life to end.
You weren't fighting to keep it.
Right. And so
you were really depressed as well, right? This is all just
Absolutely.
Culmination.
And so, I mean, the inhalant addiction got so bad that Walmart and Walgreens had my picture up. and banned me from their stores and said, you are not allowed to be here. You can't purchase these things. The police even went to these stores, and that's how I think my picture was up on there. Because I graduated with some of these police officers, and, you know, they were trying their best not to take me to jail, but that was the first time I started getting arrested was for inhalants. They didn't even know how to charge me at the time. But I had a charge of inhalation of a dangerous chemical is what they ended up charging me with. My roommate called my family in at that time. My family came to my home. My dad and my mom cleared out my medicine cabinets, all my pills. My closet was full of like 80 to 100 empty duster cans. My dad, I think, said he counted like 50 or 60 different bottles of prescriptions, varying from, you know, pain meds to psych meds to this.
Were you manipulating doctors?
Oh, at the time, I didn't know I was. Looking back, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I never really doctor shopped per se, because I got one set of meds from my regular primary doctor, and then I had pain management, which they knew what I was taking. But, I mean, I would go into my pain management crying a little fit of here, I'm, you know, in more pain. So he would up my dose and up my dose and up my dose. And I was on... the highest milligram of Oxycontin and Somas and Xanax and Lortabs. And he prescribed every single one of them, you know.
Insane.
And would give you Dilaudid shots in his office and send you home.
So I'm assuming this job comes to an unglorious end?
Yes.
Yeah.
So at the point my parents came in, I was starting to detox. I spent only one night in jail. They released me by signature on that, which that was eye-opening. Never, you know, experienced or heard or had anybody tell me anything about jail before. But they came in, cleared all my stuff, flushed all my pills, and now I'm detoxing off of everything.
Like with no help?
With nothing.
Oof.
Had you ever gone through withdrawal?
I went through withdrawals, but I never went really through detox.
Through all of it.
I was, you know, I would always spend maybe a half day to a day off of Oxycontin, which was horrible, but I would, you know, go buy off the street.
Sure.
Yeah.
Detox, no. And for as many inhalants that I was doing and for how high of milligram and how often Oxycontin I was doing, my skin was literally burning from the chemicals trying to escape my body. It was bad. My dad didn't know anything about addiction, obviously, or what to do. So when he flushed everything, I'm trying to tell him I need to come off of these slowly. And he's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. So I'm trying my best to detox. My mom, I remember sleeping in the bed with me with her arm over me because she knew I would try to find a way out. My dad sleeping on the couch, just kind of holding me there because I was trying to fight tooth and nail to get away, go somewhere. And finally, I was at a point with my parents and detoxing so bad, I said, I need to go to treatment because the doctor's office that I was at did have a pamphlet for me because they knew it was about that time. And it was a detox program and a treatment program. And I said, I will go. I need to go. And at this point, with my parents, I respect them so much and love them so much. I've never smoked in front of my parents. I've never cussed in front of my parents. I've never used in front of my parents. You know, I've never stepped out of line for the most part with my parents.
Yeah.
And I was about to chew my parents out, like bad. And before I got to that point, I told my mom, I said, I'm at a point that I can't hold back and I can't control what I'm doing or saying. I need help. And so I checked into a place called Wekiva Springs, which is in Jacksonville, Florida. If you watch the show Intervention, it's been on there numerous times.
Let me interject a quick PSA because that's a So I love the intent, right? Your parents care enough about you to do all that, but please, 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 for anybody listening, right? Not a great way to detox not a safe way to detox. So I know that it was well-intentioned, but please know that that can be life-threatening. Absolutely. So the worst thing you could tell somebody truly physically addicted to certain drugs is to just stop. It really does need a detox protocol. You could have a seizure, and that seizure could lead to worse, and you could die. So please be aware of that. Little PSA.
Thank you for that, because it is true. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I go to this detox. Again, I'm so sheltered and naive. I have no idea what I'm walking into. They take my shoelaces, they take my belts, they take my hair tie. I mean, they take everything. And my dad, his biggest concern was, please don't put her on more meds. Don't give her anything. And so they knew that. And when they found out all the things that I was on, they obviously had to give me stuff for detox, which was great. 'Cause it's still not fun, even with help. But I really didn't know what I was walking into, because this was also a treatment facility and psych ward. I honestly felt like I was in a cartoon. I was hallucinating. I was hearing things. There was people next to me that were trying to find bunny rabbits in a hole and seeing things and saying random things. And I'm like, what did I do? Like, how did I get here? And after 2 weeks of intense classes, counseling, and all of that, I started finally being honest. There was a counselor there that was trying to dig, and I'm like, the last time I did open up about my past, it was rejected, or said it wasn't true, or you haven't talked about it in 20 years. Why are you doing it now? So I was
Who did you ever do that with?
I did it with a boyfriend, and then I did it with my parents.
Oh, and so when you did that, it was, okay.
It wasn't.
So you were either doubted or subtly blamed.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I tried to open up a little bit about that, and started trusting, and then insurance quit. After 2 weeks, they said, well, we have this extended stay program that you could still work on your recovery and your counseling and stuff. Well, insurance denied that. So here I am trying to start the process of a healing. And for most people, especially women, when you open those doors and those roots, you start reliving things, you start remembering things, you have flashbacks, all the things that come along with it. And I'm now starting to remember things that I didn't even know that happened, or flashbacks of things or pictures or things in the room where these things happened. And I'm like, I couldn't handle that. And at 2 weeks, it was just kind of like a slam in the door. Now what do I do with all of this baggage? So I turned back to addiction.
I'd like to take a moment to recognize a major podcast sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by America's Thrift Stores, your go-to option for decluttering and giving back. If you have a closet bursting at the seams or a garage that's seen better days, we've got the perfect solution for you.
That's right. America's Thrift Stores makes it easy to clear out the clutter and make a positive impact in your community. Whether you're cleaning out your wardrobe, downsizing your living space, or just looking to give back, America's Thrift Stores has you covered.
And here's the best part. You've got options. Schedule a hassle-free home pickup, drop off your items at one of their convenient donation sites, or swing by an America's Thrift Store to donate in person. No matter which way you choose, you're making a difference.
Absolutely. Every donation you make to America's Thrift Stores directly benefits charities in your area, such as the Home of Grace and other fantastic organizations dedicated to helping those in need.
For example, donations made to America's Thrift Stores in southern Mississippi help the Home of Grace provide support and assistance to individuals facing drug and alcohol addiction. Your contributions make a real impact on their mission to provide freedom from addiction, through Christ-centered recovery. So not only are you decluttering your life, but you're also helping build a stronger and more supportive community.
It's truly a double blessing. So what are you waiting for? Clean out that closet, clear out that garage, and make a positive difference in your community by donating to America's Thrift Stores.
Visit America's Thrift Stores online to schedule a home pickup, locate a donation site near you, or get directions to one of their store locations.
America's Thrift Stores, where giving back never goes out of style.
You know, that place also put me on more psych meds, and my dad was like, what did I tell you?
Yeah.
You know, so psych meds, this and that and the other. And, you know, of course, was not taking anything correctly. So I went back to what was comfortable, which was inhalants and opiates.
You're familiar.
And the inhalants got to a point where now I can't even function. I'm going to and from the store, which is only a mile away, and not knowing how I got in the middle of the woods and my car's not even wrecked. You know, I didn't have a relationship with the Lord at the time. Like I said, I didn't grow up in church, but I knew something was out there. I knew something bigger, because how can I run off the road and end up with trees all around my vehicle with not a dent on there? You know, that my fiance at the time had to saw down a tree just to back the car out. You know, it was just those type of moments that were like, okay, something, and that's what started, like, if there is something more, I want it. I'm going to search for it, because I can't find anything. I searched the world for justification or acceptance, you know, the white picket fence that society tells you that you need. I searched for it. I accomplished it. I gained it, and I was still miserable. But going back to a relapse at I guess you would consider it a relapse, because I was only detoxed for 2 weeks and then back on it. So I don't even think I was fully detoxed at that time. But in and out of jail at that time, that's when it got serious. And like I said, I graduated with some of the sheriff's officers there, and they're like, Tasha, you've got to quit doing this. We don't want to take you to jail. And then finally he said, tell me you're going to hurt yourself. Tell me you're going to hurt yourself. And I'm like, I'm not going to hurt myself. And he's like, no, tell me that so I don't have to arrest you. And I remember finally understanding what he was trying to tell me. And so I went through the psych ward at the hospital this time. So it was a 3-day stay. It was supposed to be minimum, but after they knew what I was taking and just that I was in psychosis pretty much, they're like, we're not holding you. I'm like, okay. So the next day I got arrested. And at this point, the signing myself out was not an option. I had to do 45 days. It was a 90-day sentence, but you served 45 and would be on probation. I would be back in jail before I even checked into probation. And at this point, my parents knew it was a full-blown addiction. They did not know how to help. My mom, she's always been the Passover, the pushover, the coddling, the codependent one, and enabling one. I knew I could always get my way with my mom. She would always answer my collect calls. She would always put money on my books, where my dad was like, we're not answering your call. Don't call me back. He was always tough love. He still is tough love, but I also needed that too. And after being in jail for a lengthy amount of time, like I said, I would do 45 days, do another 45 days, do another 45 days. I heard about one of my cellmates was like, just sign up to go to church. We'll at least get out of the wedge. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. So I sign up.
I love it.
And that was a moment for me, because not only did I sign up just to get out of my wedge, but I didn't know I would have my first encounter with the Lord. The moment I saw the lady preaching, there was a glow about her.
Just before you turn this corner.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, were you using in jail? Were you getting stuff in? Oh, so you were not getting stuff. Okay.
Not
I know
at all.
that happens a lot. So
not at all.
Okay.
So I go to the church service. I see this lady. I feel like that angel moment where there's a halo around and that lighting around somebody. I see that in her. I see joy. And I said, man, I want that. Whatever that is, I want. And she brought a word. She played a couple of worship songs and, gave a salvation call, and I didn't go up or anything. But I remember going back to my cell and being like, Lord, if you are real, if what this lady just said is real, I want what she has. That's awesome. Let that be something I could actually achieve and attain. And so that night in my cell by myself, I gave my life to the Lord. Didn't need a church, didn't need people around, it was just me and him. Yeah. I put in a request for a Bible because at that point in my life, I was 29. I've seen the Bible. Yeah. I've tried to read a Bible. I've learned about there is a God, but I didn't know God had a son. The son came to die on a cross for me. I didn't know any of that. I was very ignorant in that part of the walk.
That's so neat because I think sometimes in the Christian community we mistakenly take for granted that everybody just knows that, right? But that's me. Yeah,
I knew nothing. Yeah. And of course, when I try to read a Bible, it just didn't make sense to me. I didn't even know there were different versions of the Bible. And I was trying to read a King James version. And I'm like, no wonder I didn't know. Yeah. I still sometimes don't know, but the jail cell gave me a New International Easy Read translation. And it spoke to me. It jumped out at me. And I mean, it was just life-changing. I also tried to sign up to go to a faith-based program, which is Salvation Army, and had interviewed with them because the judge actually is the one who told me about it. Yeah. I'm tired of seeing you. You need to do something different. You need treatment. So I reached out to Salvation Army. They came and did an intake with me at the jail. And they're like, but you're not a felon. And I'm like, no. And they're like, we only take felons.
Oh, I didn't realize that was a prerequisite.
And I'm like,
for them.
Well, what does that mean? Because I'm still learning the jail thing too. Well, what's that? But my charge was just a misdemeanor charge. So they're like, you can't come. And I'm like, but I want to. And I really feel like at that point in my life, they believed me and I believed myself. Yeah. This was it. I need help. I want it. And so they ended up getting approval for me to go into their program. I was transported to there. It was a 6-month program, but after 2 months, you could then start job seeking and go back and forth, kind of like a halfway house type deal. But it was faith-based, but it was optional. So I was at every church service. I was at every faith-based part of that program that there was. And I had a counselor who read my mail, pointed out all my flaws, all my, hurts, habits, and hangups. And I'm like, how are you doing this? Yeah. Really took the time. And I know it was because she also had a relationship with the Lord that she was just getting discernment on all the masks that I was wearing, the labels that I was wearing. And she was really peeling me like an onion and making me dig and making me work. And for the first time, I finally was not necessarily comfortable, but I was okay with sharing what happened to me in my past. Yeah. I was okay writing my testimony out for the first time. And I remember on Pass, I read it to my parents and it was not received. And I was like, okay, well, let's not let that affect me anymore. Amen. Because I always wanted and needed approval, not just from my parents, but from others. And I think for a long time, I played the victim of this happened to me, so you should treat me like this, or this happened to me, that's why I'm this way. And I lived in that and manipulated from that. And at that point in my recovery, I learned I can't be victorious and be a victim at the same time. I had to choose.
That's good.
That's great.
So I chose not to blame anybody. I chose it happened and it happened. There's evil in the world. okay, so what am I going to do with this now?
You chose healing.
And I chose to try to get to the healing part of it.
Wow.
Which was hard because, again, I'm reliving it. I'm, things are being revealed that I didn't really understand and know at the time. But I really had to be honest with myself for the first time. And I think that was the turning point of owning up to me and my flaws, owning up to covering everything up and just pushing it under a rug, so to speak, and really be honest with myself and find out who I am. Because at this point, I still didn't know what I liked, who I was, what I'm good at, what my purpose was.
Yeah.
I didn't have any idea. So I'm like basically a toddler in my counselor's office, and she's just pouring in and pouring in and pouring in. Giving my life to the Lord in jail just a month or two prior to that, again, I didn't realize what it meant. Salvation, yes. Okay, I live for the Lord now. But what did that really entail? I didn't know. I didn't know there was discipleship that should happen, mentoring that should happen. So again, me kind of straddling the fence on worldly stuff, but trying to live this new life that I know I want.
Yeah.
I was addicted to men still, and it was a co-ed rehab. So I immediately started talking to this gentleman, and he was a recovering heroin addict. And shortly after I got to the point where I was able to job seek, I went and used inhalants, passed out at a bus stop, and a cop came and got me. So I was almost 70 days clean at that point and back in jail. Dating some guy I randomly chose, the one that gave me attention. But we fell hard and we fell fast, So I ended up getting a violation of probation. They allowed me to go back to the program. Another godsend.
Yeah.
Looking back, I know that now. But we ended up still communicating and still healing at the same time, but that relationship was toxic from day one. We'd go out on pass and we'd meet up. And then eventually we both ended up using and, getting kicked out. So we moved out to a trailer, didn't have a vehicle. He had a job. I didn't have a job, but I still had my mom as a financial resource.
She's still in that codependent.
Yes. Okay. So I had money, a money source, should I say. He had a prescription, and we started shooting up together. And that was the first time I've ever used needles. Back and forth through addiction, miserable, electric about to be turned off, behind on rent. I tell my mom I need money for rent. And then I call her back probably 2 hours after picking up that money that she wired and said, I was just robbed. I need more money.
Yeah.
That cycle of I've never pawned anything, stole anything of value or from my parents. But that
you didn't need to. Your mom was handing it over.
At that point, I was using my mom too, and bringing her into this vicious cycle with her knowing absolutely nothing about it.
Which is amazing in its own right at this point. That light bulbs.
She just felt bad for me.
Well, they see what they want to see.
Yeah. So at the point where we're finally both deep in this addiction, we call Salvation Army back and beg them to come back into their program because we're not married. No, we can't. We can't go in the program, but there is a homeless shelter part of that program. He could come to the men's, you could come to the women's, y'all can't ever be together. And at that point, we're like, okay, we will do whatever we need to do. And the director of that program He was a wonderful man. Him and his wife are the ones that taught the Bible studies and did the church services. They kind of adopted us. They knew we were trying to seek the Lord. They knew we were trying really hard for our recovery. And they just, you know, even when we messed up, it was, we love you. God loves you. Let's open your word, you know? So that was my first real taste of what godly love was like, where somebody loved me no matter what I did.
Yeah.
No matter if I did make a mistake, there's consequences, yes, but they're going to love me through them anyway and not leave me, you know? And that was new to me. So, they continued to pour into us, but at that point, I was in a homeless shelter. That's very humbling because here I am, you know, owning my own home, nice job, nice vehicle, in a relationship to living in a homeless shelter. Yeah. With a needle junkie at that. I ended up breaking curfew several times where they had to kick me out. And it wasn't even opiates at that time anymore. It was just the inhalants. They really had a very strong hold on me that, I mean, looking back now, it's like how a simple thing to clean computers with, you know? But it did, it took everything from me. I ended up getting foreclosed on my home, repossessed vehicle, filed bankruptcy, you know, all the things. And it's
a miracle you can form a coherent sentence.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a miracle that you're alive. I mean, that can
so at that point, kicked out of the homeless shelter, I started living in the woods, and I did that for 2 weeks. Not bathing, not eating, just going to and from Walmart, stealing inhalants, and going back in the woods. And
I think I expected anything but that.
Yeah,
I was like, wait, what?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And at this point in my life, my parents had started going to church. My parents ended up getting baptized and were regular churchgoers. And I called my mom. I was in the middle of the woods in Jacksonville, Florida. My parents live in Mobile. And I said, I need help. Please come find me. I'm in the middle of the woods on this road at this Walmart. And she said, I have been praying for rain. There's been no rain in the forecast. And that was the reason why I called her, because my clothes were drenched. I stunk. I had a rat's nest in my hair, had no food, nothing for 2 weeks, mind you. Yeah. So I stunk and I was wet and cold. And so I called my mom and she said, I prayed for rain. I prayed for this.
Isn't that awesome?
And they found me. 6 hours away, they came and found me. And I remember my first bath. My mom had to bathe me because I was so weak. She saw my bones. I was probably 100 pounds. Wow. And she just cried, and she was just thanking the Lord. And at this point, I'm 30 years old, 30 years old, and had to swallow my pride finally to move into my parents' house, you know, and leave everything in Jacksonville behind.
Amazing you had pride left to swallow.
True.
Right? I mean, it's just...
Because I would rather be in the woods than call my parents and say, hey, help.
Yeah.
They even offered for me to come live with them. Yeah. No. So I stay in the woods. But I knew I needed more. I knew I already tasted and seen that the Lord was good. Yeah. I knew that. That was true. And I knew I could not keep staying sober with nothing, no support. My parents, they don't understand addiction. They never dealt with it. You know, I didn't have a support center. I moved from Jacksonville to Mobile and knew nobody. So I called the Mission of Hope and got on their wait list. And like you said, she didn't believe it was me calling, because she's like, if you're on inhalants, there's no way you could talk. Yeah. There's no way you could form sentences, but you had to call every single day. And I had to call every single day for 2 months before they even allowed me to come in. Wow. Because I wasn't an emergency, because I was sober at the time. I wasn't in active addiction. I wasn't going to detox. So I called every day. But at that point, I started going to church with my parents, and I started to go to a Celebrate Recovery. And I told the Lord, you know how you give those kind of like, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you.
Making a deal.
Making a deal. I said, Lord, I'm really going to sell out this time. I am not going to date anybody. I'm not going to have friends. I'm not going to have people influence me because I know me. I'm an addictive personality.
Yeah.
I'm going to just focus on me and you right now. And I will want to move back to Jacksonville after a year. So once I checked into the Mission of Hope, I did that program for 90 days. It's a 90-day program. And I got so much poured into me. I've got so much, you know, about a relationship with the Lord and what that meant. It was discipleship. Yeah. It was, you know, Bible studies. It was a lot. I mean, you know, a lot of these faith-based programs, a lot of people say, well, it's just Jesus crammed down your throat. Well, that's what I needed. Yeah. That's exactly what I needed because I tried everything else down my throat. Might as well try Jesus, that's you know?
Right. Yeah.
And that's what it took for me. Yeah. And I fell deeply in love with him, but I also got this sense of pride. Like, I've got this. So at 90 days, I'm good. I've got a relationship with the Lord. I've got this, but now I got to move back home with my parents, you know? And my dad and I are a lot alike. So we didn't always get along or see eye to eye. And I think the first time we had an argument, I immediately said, I'm out of here. And I started walking and I immediately went and did an Inhalant. But thankfully, it was a one-day slip. And that night when I was in the woods behind Walmart again, just different Walmart, I heard the Lord. And I knew I couldn't keep doing this and live a right life with him. I knew I would die in my addiction. Yeah. That's basically what he told me. And it scared me. It scared me so bad. And from that moment on, I haven't had anything.
That was
my moment.
And how long ago was that?
That was December of 2010. So 14 and a half years ago. Wow. What's really cool is the Mission of Hope really took a chance on me. I was 90 days sober and their house mom just left. And the director at the time, which was a genie, Herod, she said, I want you to be a house mom. The Lord told me to give you a call. And I'm like, nope. I don't like women. I don't want to quit smoking. You know, I had all the list of things. And she said, well, will you just pray about it? And I said, I will absolutely pray about it. And then the Lord told me, this is where you need to be. And it was the best decision of my life because I needed the extra accountability. Right. I attended every Bible study and every church service with the clients like I was still a client because technically that's how I saw myself. Yeah. But I was at a point in my healing journey to help other women too. And there was so many women that had similar stories of abuse, sexual abuse, physical, the emotional, all the abuses, you know, that just didn't see a way out. Yeah. And it continued to let me heal as I helped others. Oh, yeah. And it was just the most fulfilling thing. And I am just in awe in God on how he could use somebody like me.
Well, I love that you say that last piece, that it continued to help you heal by helping others, yes, right?
Absolutely.
So I often refer back to the 12 steps. And again, the 12 steps are extremely, they're biblically rooted, right? They actually preceded AA, and AA, I kind of always say that, but you could literally do a Bible study on them. But the 12th step, is all about giving back and carrying the message to others, because it is still part of our journey. Right. I think one mistake a lot of people in the helping field make is to think that because I'm a helper, I'm no longer a helpee. Well, that's never true. Never. Right? Well, this side of heaven, we're blessed if we're both, but the one that we always are will be a helpee. We always need some help. And so I love that you said that, and giving back is definitely a part of the healing process.
Absolutely.
The other thing I love that I heard in this that both of you kind of echo is this ability to took you different paths to get there, but to say, I need to focus on my responsibility in this, right? A lot of people don't understand that, right? Because the victim role...
Take the ownership.
Yeah, the victim role can feel comforting sometimes, right? I mean, it gives us lots of really bad freedom. It's not freedom at all, but that courage to step into personal responsibility and say, you said this, and I loved it. You said, you said the way you were looking at it is that this happened to me, and that's why I'm this way. That was your victim stance. Mm-hmm. How do you see that now? How would you change that?
I changed my perspective by the intimate relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
I give God the glory. I went through it so I could help others.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't look at it like, oh, this happened to me. I don't see the guilt and the shame anymore. It's the empowerment that it has given me to help more people on paths that were like mine.
And you don't have to be quiet or be silent anymore. You get to share it and watch how it helps someone else.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I want to say, because we actually did one of our podcasts was a roundtable discussion on the topic of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And what I loved about that statement, again, I'm looking at it as you said it, this happened to me and that's why I am the way that I am, that victim stance, right? I want to say something that may be hard for somebody to listen to, but I want to say it while you're here because you walked through it, and I would love your feedback on this. Anybody who's in that moment right now, you are not the way you are because anything happened to you. And this is a difficult thing I'm about to say, and I get it. And there's a compassionate way through this. What I'm going to say may not sound so compassionate, but I want you to know I say it out of love. You're not the way you are because anything happened to you. You're the way you are because you refuse to move through that moment. Right. You refuse to move past that moment. And the way past that moment is forgiveness. And I know it may seem a million miles away, but until you can get there, until you can move past that moment, you are keeping you stuck.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
That's really good. That's true.
Is that
absolutely?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So I kind of want to fast forward a little bit. This has been really remarkable. I love how your stories complement one another, but we still haven't really seen the fullness of that. So where does this happen? There. So you're both you're both in your individual recoveries. How does this magic happen?
Should I say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in the Mission of Hope on the men's side, doing the internship, so to speak. And the whole time I was at the mission on the men's side, I didn't know there was a women's center. I had no clue. Nobody ever went over there. Nobody ever talked about it, which is probably good.
Blissful ignorance.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
Which is really good. But I never knew there was a women's side to that. So going in, when you graduate, you're able to, obviously you can still work for the mission, but you can also, go do things if you need to, like if you got a grocery run you need to do or things like that. Well, I started working for the mission, and the furniture store that the Mission of Hope runs is right across the street from the women's. And so I was driving the truck for a lot of the deliveries and pickups and stuff like that. And so I finally figured out, there's a women's center over there.
Before we go any further, let's take a minute to address the man or the woman listening to today's episode and wishing for a better life. Or maybe addiction has completely overtaken a family member or a friend.
You are not alone. As you may know, the Jesus Loves Addicts podcast is produced by the Home of Grace, a Christ-centered addiction recovery program in South Mississippi with over 60 years of experience.
The Home of Grace has residential programs ranging from 30 days to 12 months. With 2 separate campuses for men and women, they are fully staffed with caring individuals who want nothing more than to guide you to a life of recovery.
Services include individual and group counseling, marriage and family counseling, classes, workshops, GED, and workforce training, all grounded in biblical principles.
And because of donations from the community, the cost of the program is incredibly affordable.
Thousands of alumni from across the country can tell you there is no other program in the world quite like the Home of Grace.
If you want to start a new path to recovery, don't wait. Speak with an admission specialist today. Visit homeofgrace.org or call 833-55-GRACE to talk with someone.
That's 833-55-GRACE. Call the Home of Grace today.
So I started driving the truck for the Mission of Hope and doing a lot of pickups and deliveries. And the Women's Center, like I said, was across the street. Well, I never really, had any business over there. There wasn't nothing for me, except I think there was one time where I picked up either a washer or dryer or something that got me over there. But a friend of mine that was in that, remember a while back when I said there was a friend of mine that went through the program with me, he was going to go to the halfway house and I was too scared. Well, this guy went through the halfway house and was doing really good and everything. Well, he started dating this lady next to me. Oh. And they were, you tell her that part, but
the drama.
They were dating, but he didn't have a vehicle. So I was the chauffeur. I got to drive him around, and that's how we got to meet. I actually went over there one day for something. I don't remember what it was, but she said, "Hey, you're Aaron's friend." I said, "Yeah, I'm Bo." And so we got to talking and everything, but going back to work and all that stuff. But I would go pick Aaron up and take him to Tasha or whatever it was we went to go do. Well, I wasn't invited, I guess. They wanted my vehicle.
You just drop them off.
I dropped it all off. But anyway, so one thing with that, it just, I asked him one day, I said, we're starting to go around, me and some of the staff, some of the guys that have graduated are going around to other ministries and singing. We actually came here many, many years ago and started singing and going into other facilities and singing and just telling our testimony and things like that. I said, we go to the Home of Grace a lot for women over in 8 Mile. I said, we don't have a woman with us. I said, would it be fine for her to go? Obviously you can go too. We'll all go together. But I want to get her to come out and do her testimony and stuff and really relate to these ladies. He said, absolutely, not a problem.
Now, were you already harboring some secret?
Okay. Honest to goodness, I wasn't. Not even when they broke up. Yeah. I still wasn't. Okay. I didn't even see it like that because I remember it was funny because I remember they came to church. The women and the men's came to church and they were sitting together and it never even dawned on me that something like that, So anyway, she started coming around with us and singing with us and testifying and doing the music ministry and stuff with us at these other rehabilitation centers. And I don't know, she could probably tell that part better than I can, but somehow or another they Splitsville. And whatever it was, they
pretty good description.
They broke up.
They were done.
And but I went to him and I said, hey, look, I understand y'all are breaking up or broke up or whatever. I don't want her to not be able to go to these things anymore. Is it cool that she still goes to these functions with us, the Haven of Hope, the Mission, of course, what am I?
Wings of Life.
Wings of Life.
Home of Grace.
City of Refuge. All these places we would go. He said, absolutely, man, please take her. I said, okay, that's cool. And so we're continuing to do that, continuing to do the singing and stuff. And I remember it was one night I was at the Mission about to go to bed. And she texted me. She asked me what my prayer request was or something like that, I think it was. And I said, I think, my whole life I really never wanted to settle down with anybody or get married. And I didn't even want to own my own home. I would rather sleep on your couch than own my own home. I said, I think I want, maybe to find someone that God, has for me. Because I think a lot of men, and possibly women, I'm sure as well, but when you've come out of an addiction and you've got a little bit of time under you, you start to think about the next chapter. Obviously, marriage, kids.
Now you can.
Yeah, you're able to do it now. Good and well the life that you led before is obviously not going to, do anything great for you. So, man, I need to start thinking about this, well, there were some words that were said, as far as our little, was it text message or a phone call?
It was text message.
Text messages. And there were some words, she said, well, you're already at that place where you're I guess, a catch, so to speak. You didn't say that.
No.
But
She's like, I did not.
but that's what I read.
That's what you saw.
That's what I saw. And she said something along the lines of, I said, I just want to be good enough for somebody, for a female, for a wife or a girlfriend.
He was setting me up.
You got to bite.
Baited the hook.
Yeah, set hook. And she said, well, you already are. And she said, well, you're funny. You've got a great sense of humor. You're cute. And I said, really?
Oh my gosh.
Here we go. And so it basically was, giddy talk and all that. And I said, would you like to maybe go out on a date sometime? And she said, well, let's pray a little bit. Not about it. But ultimately, God always wins. So he was in our favor, my favor. And so we did. We ended up, it was a couple of weeks later, I think. Was it a week later? It was 2 weeks later. We went. It was September 1st. Is when it was. 2000.
That was our first date. Yeah.
Yeah, the very first date, September 1st, 2011, and we didn't have no money. Obviously, we didn't have no money, nothing to offer the other person, except for our love for Jesus. And
that's a lot.
And so we went to Dolphin Island. Back then, it was free. You didn't have to pay or nothing. You could just roll up on the beach. And we had a little tent. She made some food and swam, and I don't remember if that was that guy. It was at the time that I brought my guitar. So I was gonna, I'm about to
coming in hardcore.
He written a lot of songs for me.
And so I wrote some songs. There was some really great moments of finding out somebody's life without being high, not being drunk. Mm-hmm. And that day, I promise you this. That day, I told her, I said, "I'm going to marry you. You are the one that God has for me."
There almost wasn't a date number 2.
But you see, there was.
I was going to say,
But
you did.
There, I did. I said, you are the one that God has for me, and I love you. And
this is date 1.
Date 1.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. We've known each other for several months now or whatever. But this was date 1. Yeah. And I already knew.
Yeah, you came in with heavy artillery. Yeah,
and that was why there was almost not a date too, because when we had serial dating, that's a red flag.
Yeah, somebody that's extreme extrovert that I don't really hide or I don't know what that word would be, but I don't have any filters as far as that goes. Yeah. To somebody that's extremely introvert, it's very difficult, for her to hear that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So just inject here for a moment. How in the world did a second day come around? Because you're at the verge of running here.
I was. So like he said, when I started dating, like I told you earlier, I gave the Lord a year. Well, here we are almost a year and a half, and I still didn't go hang out with people. I didn't date or anything. And when God opened up that door, I started going to church, and at that time I was staff, so I could go to my own Sunday school class versus going with the clients. And I signed up for the single Sunday class, because you want to meet people. And I felt at that point I'm ready for a real relationship without hiding and masking and all that. And I meet somebody, and that was Aaron. And I was like, I know how to pick him, because he's like, oh, I'm at the Mission of Hope halfway house. And I'm like,
and I don't have a car.
I met you at church. He didn't have a car. And he's a great guy. There was nothing ill will that happened between us. He was on fire for the Lord. I knew what I needed, and he wasn't able to give it because I didn't want to take away from his walk either. Yeah. So we both just kind of went our separate ways. But that was, again, after Bo was chauffeuring us around because neither one of us had a vehicle. And, but so date 2, I don't know how that ever happened, but I'm so thankful it did. Yeah. Because on date 2, 2 weeks later,
15th.
September 15th, the Lord told me as well. Like, this is
okay.
it.
I'm okay.
So, and that's what he used to joke, like, I'm closer to the Lord because he told me first, you know? And I'm like, okay.
Y'all are great.
But our date night spot was Dauphin Island. We had off every other weekend was all we had off. So we just talked on the phone to get to know each other. Our first date, I shared my life story, not just my testimony, but my life story with him because, like I said, as I was learning about myself, I'm not holding back at this point anymore. I'm transparent. Transparency is God's favorite color.
Yes.
You know, and
the truth shall set us free.
If you don't like who I am, and I even told him that I'm going to tell you everything about me because if you feel that it ain't for you, by all means,
no hard
there
feelings.
won't be a date number 2, you know, and that's how our relationship has been. We have to be transparent with each other at all times because statistics are against us anyway, both being in recovery, you know, but a year after that, we got married, celebrated with all our family and friends. And, the first year of marriage, you expect to be the best. It's like your honeymoon phase of marriage. And it was not. It was one of our toughest years, especially as a new Christian. I never experienced a valley before. You know, I didn't really have a big setback, so to speak, of where I really am relying on faith and really, you know, because those are the learning moments. Those are the faith building moments in those valleys. And shortly after we got married, what was it, about 3 months after we got married, I got a call from his mom and said, Bo's dad's gone. And I'm like, which he had been in and out of the hospital. Yeah. We knew he was sick, but he was getting better at that point. She's like, I can't tell Bo, you're going to have to tell him. And I'm like, okay. So, you know, 3 months into marriage and here I am having to tell my husband, you know, some of the hardest things that he's going to have to hear. And, like Bo said, people are watching. Some people even thought we would fail or maybe was wanting us to fail, but we clung to each other and our anchor is the Lord. So, you know, we were there for each other and that was a very hard season. And, you know, then we found out we're pregnant. And so we found out on our 1 year anniversary that we were pregnant. And
you had years before been told you can't have babies,
I won't be
right?
able to conceive.
But God, amen.
But God. Yeah, so we're pregnant. The whole Mission of Hope is so excited because we're the first couple that ever started dating from men and women's program.
Because, like I said before, I never knew. None of us ever knew that there was a one
I mean,
there.
we had to ask permission, you know, to first start off dating. But so the first child from the Mission of Hope, you know, the first couple from the Mission of Hope, everybody was ecstatic. Everybody's elated. I'm especially, you know, he's already writing songs about this child. And we go in for our ultrasound and there's no heartbeat. So that's something that was never even thought about, talked about, you know. It was devastating.
Yeah.
And not only that, but to tell everybody back on that hill. It was hard. That was another hard moment, but the Lord saw us through that as well. He had a really tough time, especially that first night, where he didn't know what to do. You know, like I said, he was talking to the baby, writing songs about the baby, and
that was horrible.
It was, it was horrible. The next day, it was my turn, kind of like, you know, we kind of went back and forth, like really emotional for me one moment and then real emotional for him. And I remember praying in the shower and the Holy Spirit just spoke through me. And that was the first time I ever spoke in tongues with, you know, but I literally felt at that moment, the Lord took my grief with him. I can't explain it. It's hard to put into words. Yeah. But he helped me heal instantly that next morning. You know, it's still was a hard thing.
Sure.
And, it still was a battle that we were trying to navigate through, especially after losing his father a few months before.
Yeah, wow.
And then that's when we got the news about his brother.
Yeah. I told you before that
that was
my brother came through
that is one thing after
in Coleman, doing that program, and then he came to us for the
had the car accident,
and then the car accident. He got him a new car. He was doing, like I said, things were great, looking up, and there was just too much cars. One of those Honda. Probably like one of those Fast and Furious.
Yep.
Way too much motor, for
Plus
somebody.
not knowing where he was and missing the turn, overcorrecting.
So that was in March. It was March.
Yeah.
So from January,
October,
losing our child, and then in March, I lost my brother.
Yeah.
And that's when the whole, why is this happening? You know what I mean? You question, these guys are watching you. These guys are looking at, what is he going to do now?
Yeah.
Where's his God at now?
Right.
Now it matters.
Well, there's another Job moment, right?
Yeah. That's where Job came in. That's where I closed my Bible, turned off the Christian radio. I'm no longer praying. I'm yelling. I want to know why. And that's when God smacked me with Job. The last few chapters was, who are you to tell me when somebody comes to this earth and somebody leaves? And it was an eye-opener. And you basically fall on your knees and say, I'm sorry, I'm not worthy of this. I apologize. You praise God for the time that you do have. Because, again, at the very beginning of this podcast, or this recording we're doing, that's what I said. I feel like it was such an eye-opener to how quickly this life will go.
Yeah.
How short we have of time. Yeah. And it was just reassuring that eternity is forever. I will see them again. Yeah. We will see our child again. Yeah. But since then, we've got two beautiful.
Y'all got Caitlin and Buddy.
Yeah,
I know we're almost out of time, but I definitely wanted to hear about them.
Yeah. So we didn't take us long to get pregnant again. And I know that Bo, in the beginning stages of the pregnancy, was kind of
standoff.
The walls are up. Like, we want to make sure everything.
I'm scared.
Yeah. But we gave birth to a little girl, healthy little girl. She's amazing. Amen. She is now 10, and then I was ready to go back. So the Lord called me to be a stay-at-home mom shortly after she turned 6 months old, because I was still working at the mission. He had ended up moving on to a different job, but they allowed me to work from home, which was amazing. I was doing intake and was a kitchen supervisor at the men's program at this time, because once we got married, I transferred. And who allows you to work from home and puts a phone line in your house so you could raise a child? But at the point where she started crawling and moving around a lot, I was like, I can't do this, for her. I needed more. So we ended up leaving when she was 6 months, and I became a stay-at-home mom, which I never imagined I would do. Yeah. I didn't think I would ever be good at mothering. But that was a season in my life that the Lord kind of not isolated me from everything else, but I was not in my protective bubble anymore of being in ministry. Yeah. And I was finally walking it out with just me and the Lord, like walking my faith out, walking my recovery out. But I also know that, you hear about postpartum depression and stuff. Well, I had postpartum anxiety, and I did not realize that was a thing until later on. But my anxiety flared up really, really bad, where I was isolating. I wasn't going places. I wasn't seeing people. I would stay cooped up in the house with my little girl, So I knew the tools. I had the tool belt full of tools. Now it's time to apply them, like you're always teaching and learning and
do the work.
You keep learning as you go. And so we were at a church for several years by this time. And so I went to the women's director and I said, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. I kind of like word vomited all over her. Like, this is my testimony. I'm in recovery. I'm a single stay-at-home mom. I'm this, and I'm like looking back, I'm like, she probably was scared out of her mind from me, but it was a moment of another transparency moment. Like, I am going to be transparent no matter what. And she had just had a child. So she started meeting me for play dates. She was the leader of the women's ministry. So any event the church had, she had let me help set up and break down and just included me in stuff to get me out of myself, And that connection, even though I was struggling with social anxiety and anxiety a lot, I knew I had to get out of my comfort zone. Yeah. I knew I had to do different or I'd be right back to where I started again. Yeah.
Well, anxiety cannot be your God, right? God has to be your God. And so you have to do the opposite of what it's telling you. And that connection broke that for you. That's wonderful. And at this time, Caitlin was almost 3 years old. So I was very involved with the church at that time and ready to get back into the work field. And I was at a church service for a women's event, and the Lord gave me a vision of a baby. Bo kept wanting to have another child. I was content. My life was full. I was happy. I have my one child. And then the Lord gives me this vision. So, of course, I'm like trying to dissect it.
Who's closer to the Lord again? I knew.
What the spiritual meaning of a baby was, new birth, all of the things. And finally, I'm like, Lord, you know my heart. You're going to have to soften it. You're going to have to do what you do because I'm not having another child, But as you learn in your walk too, the more you're obedient, you just got to be obedient. Yeah, what's that old expression? If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Right. Yes, exactly. So, and then it was really cool because a couple of ladies at our church prophesied over us. Are like, I don't know if y'all are ready to have another child, but you're going to have a boy. And I'm like, what? And sure enough. Then another lady said, I don't know if y'all are trying to have another baby, but you're going to be pregnant right away. Yeah. And sure enough, as soon as we decided that we were going to have another baby, we were pregnant immediately. That baby looked just like my vision that God gave me. It's a little boy named Beatty. He is now 7 years old. And, so trying to get back into the work field of ministry, we had agreed at 6 months with him, like I was ready to do it again. And I called it was necessary for you, right? Here's another place where giving back is going to help you. But. So I called the Mission of Hope. They didn't have any openings, especially if you lived off site, they can't tack on the room and board. And so I just started praying. I had my we were on a small group at the time. They started praying with me and the Lord just kept putting Pasco on my heart. So I'm praying for Pasco, and I knew the owner, Philip Stanford, a little bit. But I didn't know that there was a men's program and a women's program at that time. So I'm just praying. And finally the Lord's like, reach out. This is more than a prayer. Yeah. So I messaged him and, he knew of me and I knew of him. And I said, my background, I don't know if you're hiring for admin. I will clean toilets. I will clean offices. I just feel like I'm supposed to be back in ministry. And he said, well, when can you meet for an interview? I said, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I've got 2 kids. He said, bring them. Yeah. And I'm like, wow. Okay. I met with him and the men's director, Rocky Waits. And he said, what's really cool is we just bought a facility for a women's campus. And we really looked at each other on that closing day and said, now who's going to run it? Yeah. And so they just started praying for a women's director. And that same week is when I messaged them. And so I've been at the Pasco home for the last 7 years. That's just awesome. It's just been amazing. Well, so listen, with that, I'm going to be the killjoy and bring us in here. But what a great place to end, because it really encapsulates kind of what I wanted to capture here. And that is, I think one of the things, I kind of feverishly write things as these stories go and think, what's the part that rises to the top here for me? And man, for both of you, and in this story of really being directed quite overtly, not covertly, quite overtly by God, right? With the visions and the direction and all that kind of stuff. There's an old expression that says, he is either Lord of all or he's not Lord at all. And both of you just emanate
Lord of all.
that you came to that realization, right? And it's funny because I was listening on the way here today of the story of Exodus, and in that story is how Pharaoh slowly gets to the point of releasing Israel. But before he does, he tries to make deals, right? He says, well, first he's saying, no, no, no. Then he says, okay, well, just take the men. Go do what you got to do. Just take the men. And then he says, well, okay, well, just take these people, but don't take the livestock, right? And then finally, he realizes God said this and God's going to get his way.
Yeah,
and
no matter what.
It took great tragedy.
Take it all.
But ultimately, that's the thing. And guys, in our own lives, I love their story because that moment of salvation is beautiful because our eternities are changed in that moment. But our finite lives are not necessarily. There's still discipleship. There's still change. We still live in a broken, fallen world, and we still experience broken, fallen things. But if we allow him to be Lord of all, he will navigate you through those troubled waters that is life, right? Life is tough, but eternity does not have to be. That's based on what we do in the here and now. So, guys, I love your story. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for really shining that light. Yeah, definitely. Guys, as always, until next time, Jesus loves addicts. Jesus loves you. We love you. And we'll see you next time.